Hello, and on this first day of Pride Month, welcome to Talk Heathen, the show where we value good ideas over old traditions and ancient poetry, and where beliefs are expected to have a good reason. I'm Christy Powell, and today I am desperately looking for any reasonably good reason to explain a bill on its way to Governor Abbott's desk. Senate Bill 10, recently passed by the Texas Senate, would require the 10 Commandments to be displayed prominently in every public school classroom across the state. Not suggested, required. Not a well-rounded history of the people of the state, not a collection of quotes from influential lawmakers and founders, but a list of rules about how to protect God's feelings and how to feel about your neighbor's possessions, including his wife. Let's not kid ourselves. This is not about history. It's about control. It's about whose worldview gets to be centered and whose gets pushed aside. Because when the government mandates one religious text in a public classroom, it's not just promoting values, it's promoting a religion. And when that happens, our Muslim neighbors, our Jewish students, our secular families, and of course, everyone who believes in real religious freedom are left standing outside the circle. So let me say it plainly. The government doesn't get to pick your God or any God for you. That's not freedom. That's coercion in a gold leaf red letter edition. So today, I'd love to hear from you, especially if you grew up in a school where religion crept into the classroom. How did it shape you? How did it silence you? And what does it mean for a child to be told by the state which beliefs are worthy of a poster on the wall? This conversation matters because neutrality isn't oppression and inclusion doesn't mean erasure. It means every student, every family has the right to belong without an altar in their classroom. You're watching Talk Heathen. Let's think critically, let's talk honestly, and let's get into it because the show is coming right now. Okay, welcome everyone. Today is June 1st, 2025. I am your host, Christy Powell, and with me today is my friend, ObjectivelyDan. Excited to be doing this with you.
Yes, that's right. You need a straight cis white guy, token straight cis white guy as your co-host for this first day of Pride, of course.
Right, just jumping into Pride. I mean, we've got big topics. You and I grew up in this area. You and I grew up around these, kind of evangelical incursions into the public school system. I think there's a lot for us to talk about.
Yes, it's true. We were talking a little bit before the show because I did go to public school, but I went to public school in Waco, Texas. So I think my credibility is still there,
the
for that.
Yeah, the secularness of that school.
Secularness was a little bit off, and somehow I survived. David Oliveria has a great joke about Waco. He used to run a church there. He said that in Waco, there's more Christians than people, which is a really good, good joke. So yeah, definitely seen some violations in my time as you might have as well. Although you went to a Christian school, so.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. And so that definitely shapes some of my thinking on all of this, because for me, it was very normalized. It was even pushed and pressured, but not to the benefit of anybody I went to school with. If you saw the college acceptance rate of my college preparatory religious schooling, you'd see that there were a lot of lies being told and a lot of messy ideas being preached from the classroom. And I don't think anybody should have to go through that if they didn't choose it. And I definitely don't want our tax dollars paying for it and for the government to be pushing it in the ways that it is. So it's getting messy, and I think we have a lot to get into.
Yeah, definitely. Especially when it comes to stuff like evolution. Like, again, I went to a good public school that actually taught evolution. That was not the norm for most of my friends that went to other schools. And even if they taught it, there still definitely was a hint of oh, this is actually not real, just based on what I've heard from other people. Right. I mean, that's just one example. There's a lot of these kinds of issues nowadays. They're oh, we got to put the 10 Commandments in schools. I mean, they've been doing that for a while, but now it's I don't know, feels like it's happening again. These sorts of waves of legislation to just do anything but actually fix the material conditions that schools
Right. Yeah.
face.
And, this is at a moment where teachers have been begging for raises for a long time. We've had a number of like walkouts and protests en masse. I mean, it is a messy situation, and this does not feel like the right solution.
Yeah.
So we're definitely going to spend some time on these ideas. We definitely want to hear from our audience. Of course, Talk Heathen, we are open to all of your questions about religion, secular humanism, atheistic morality, cosmology, philosophy, science, history, life, the universe, and everything. That said, Dan, is there anybody in particular you're hoping to talk to today?
Oh man, you're asking me. I'm always picking these calls. I feel like you should have the first go at it. There's a lot of different ones. I see Jesse looks interesting to me. I think they're still in the screening room though. So,
no, we've got some good calls on the line. We've got a few lines open, and before we jump into all of that, I just want to remind people that Talk Heathen is a production of the Atheist Community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and of course, the separation of religion and government. Yes. We are a live call-in show with open lines, so get your calls in at 512-991-9242 or from your computer at tiny.cc/callth. While those calls are loading, while you guys are getting in here, let's go ahead and bring our friend Aaron in for the question of the week, our Talk Heathen to Me segment. Aaron, what you got for us this week? You are muted, my friend.
Still we muted. Knew that was going to happen, didn't we? You warned me. There we go. All right. All right. Well, today it's time for our Talk Heathen to Me segment where we get into our question of the week. And last week we asked everybody, name an inappropriate time and or place to suggest a prayer circle. And here are our top 3 answers. Number 3 from Stephen Kahn. Inappropriate time to suggest a prayer circle? Right before the climax of a bukkake session.
It's visceral. It's visual.
Really vivid.
Thanks for that.
It's a little too visceral, honestly.
A little bit.
Who's picking these? Who's picking these?
Early morning.
I want to know.
Yeah.
That'll wake you up. Okay. Number 2 from Daniel Aaron. Let's form a prayer circle around this tornado and ask God to stop the storm.
Yeah. Don't do that.
Don't really apply these beliefs.
The host of Talk Heathen would like to remind you not to try or attempt anything suggested.
Yeah, that's going to work about as well as rolling the dice and saying on a 1, the tornado will dissipate. That's just not going to work. And number 1 from Colin Matz, an inappropriate moment for a prayer circle during a square dance.
Nice and punny. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So our answers are really all over the place today.
Really all over the place. Yeah. We went from dad jokes to very sexually explicit humor in the course of about 30 seconds. And I don't know how to feel about that, but
that's the Christy Powell Talk Heathen guarantee.
Yeah, it really is.
It's June, right? It's June.
It's June.
It's a new month.
I'm not trying to yuck somebody's yum. I'm just saying that, like you said, it's a little early. It's a little early.
A little early in the day.
You know?
All right. Well, the prompt for next week is, what would Jesus's rap name be? Dan, what would Jesus?
Dan, I hope you have something for this. I feel so unqualified here.
So for some reason, what came to mind to me was MCAD, because it's like, I don't know, BCAD, right? I don't know. That's the only thing I could think of. It's not even that good. Gosh. It doesn't make sense.
That's so not good. And it's like better than mine, which was just MCJC. So,
no.
Yeah. All right. We came up with the same bad joke. We gotta fix this in the future. Get the producers in on it.
But you know what? That's okay, because our commenters will have better answers than we will. So please rescue us on this question. Give us your best this week in the comments to this episode, and we'll be featuring you next week.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Cool. Thank you, Aaron. Yeah,
thanks, Aaron.
Okay, well, with all of that preamble, all of that fun, let's go ahead and jump on the lines. And you said Jesse in Michigan seems like a great conversation to start off with.
Yeah.
Jesse, what's on your mind today?
Hello.
Howdy, what can we do for you?
Hello. Yeah, sorry, I don't know. My name is Jesse. And I'm in Michigan, and I wanted to talk to you. I'm especially grateful to talk to you, Christy, because I know you're a mental health professional. And well, my problem is dealing with mental health in the atheist community.
Sure. Actually,
kind of funny, but one of the reasons why I became an atheist was sort of my education in the arts kind of helped. But also, I had mental health problems as a teenager, and I started receiving cognitive behavioral therapy, which I found to be very helpful. And, like, it sort of helps deconstruct the way that I was thinking. As I grew up as a Catholic, and being Catholic kind of insinuates that you're worthless, and you start to believe that after a while. And
I hear that.
Directly contributed to my mental health. But the problem that I'm really having now is that I identify as I would say this, let me be clear. I am under the Latino umbrella as far as the American political way of describing the census is concerned. But I wanted to let the audience know that I reject that label because Latino favors it favors the colonial powers of the Spanish and also favors the Catholic Church. So I strongly reject that. So, yeah, and as a person from Texas, Texas is peppered with ancient sort of, well, not really ancient, but old missions like the Alamo, which my ancestors were converted to either coerced or against their will or using force or other means. So
I hear that, and I hope that is history that we are still willing to teach in our public high schools, which is something I definitely worry about. Like, San Antonio has a missions baseball team. We're definitely aware of their existence, but how do we talk about them? What is the story that we are telling people, and how are we educating people about the oppressive nature of those institutions? They're not just cool old buildings. They're places of incredible oppression. But yeah, with all of that in mind, Jesse, tell me about your call for today. Tell me about your experiences of mental health in the atheism community, or what it is that you're struggling with here.
I guess I'm trying to put it into words, so it's really helpful to speak to y'all because I don't really have any other resources to talk to other people. I mean, for example, like I said, I'm in the arts, and I deal with people who are under the atheist umbrella all the time, but I don't know any other skeptics. And I don't feel at home or safe within my own arts community because I might have somebody say, yeah, I'm atheist, but then they'll believe some nonsense about alternative medicine or, in my personal encounters, I encounter a lot of people who don't understand what it's like to not be white in the arts. And it kind of has a tax on my mental health, and it starts to feel like I don't belong. And,
I hear that. I mean, we are here promoting atheism, but we also like to bring to the table critical thinking, secular humanism, like some of these other notions. Atheism, absent those things, can create a vacuum where a lot of completely irrational, wooey type beliefs can come in and fill some space.
Yeah, and it makes me feel like an asshole because I talk to people like in the arts or the art world, like at an exhibition or something, and they'll say something that I really just vehemently disagree with that might fall in line with a certain RFK. That's all well and good, but it's like they can say that stuff and be accepted, but I can't. The moment you say I don't believe that, I feel like I'm an asshole, or like I have to sort of challenge it, and I don't want to do that. I just want to be accepted in my own space. And the reason why I brought up Tejano, my culture, my identity, is because I don't feel like I'm at home in Texas either, especially with all of the laws that are changing and sort of oppressing. I mean, what it comes down to is it's oppressing me in my own country, and it doesn't feel good to be the target of this administration. And I find a lot of allyship with the trans community that I have a lot of respect for because it's sort of this quest of finding the space that you belong in. And I would say I align with it tremendously. But I guess it's really hard to put this into words. I'm trying to find a place where I belong, but the atheist community that I know of isn't sufficient. And I don't fit into my own community either because I'm an artist, and so if I get asked all the time to do a painting of Our Lady of Guadalupe. Do you know that image?
Sure. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I get asked to do that a lot. I'm like, I don't believe this, and that to me, Catholicism is the sword in which was used to oppress my ancestors. And I strongly reject it. And I know that y'all receive a lot of calls from other Latino people, and I can hear it in the accent. And it breaks my heart to hear people loving that oppression. I'm like, no, these people literally killed and committed gender-based violence against my ancestors 200 years ago. And it's, you know, and this sort of mass deportation is a continuation of that. And it makes me feel, it's like not good for my mental health.
Yeah, no, the lack of inclusion here is breathtaking, and I can absolutely appreciate why it's challenging to find a community where you feel like you fit in. You know, I did not go looking for the atheist community of Austin. I really stumbled backwards into it. And now I'm so grateful years later to have so many wonderful friends and so many ties to this community where I'm surrounded by people who don't just reject the idea of a God, but who have a interest in skepticism, who have a interest in promoting the separation of religion and government, who are concerned about and keeping an eye on the ways that religion mixed up with government can lead to all forms of bigotry and oppression, and certainly what we are seeing in the mass deportation movement and some of these other like very real issues. Unfortunately, I don't know exactly where to point you beyond saying building your own community is always going to be a part of the process. But Dan, is there any particular organization, anything that comes to mind, or any advice that you might have on how to connect with people who Jesse maybe be able to better relate to?
Well, it's really tough because not everybody views atheism the same way that we necessarily do. So like there was this idea put out, it was 2012, a person named Jay McWright wrote this thing. It was called Atheism Plus, and it was in a response to sort of some sexual scandals that were happening in atheist conferences and stuff. And all it was basically saying was, hey, we should also be like atheists and feminists, right? Which is something that like I feel like most people we talk to today is like, yeah, obviously that was like a big deal to a lot of people then. This idea that atheism could also encompass these other values or even should have any value judgments on other issues. For some people, that's a novel thing. And some people still struggle with that, and to incorporate these other values of humanism and these other values of recognizing oppression and histories of violence and things like that, and fighting against that. So like that's a difficulty in itself, right? One is finding atheists that also align yourselves in those values. That's definitely different now. I think more people are open to that. But there's still some old school people that don't even incorporate that. So you have that, but also, you know, atheists in general, organizing atheist organizations, the saying has been said many times, it's like organizing a herd of cats. Just because you have so many people who value themselves as free thinkers and skeptics, that they tend to fight a lot. There tends to be a lot of miscommunication, and you know, sometimes skills are misappropriated in places. So, you know, when Christy's saying, yeah, you should start your own, I understand that there's a huge challenge there, and that's not something that everybody can really do. But honestly, the biggest fruits of organizations I've seen have come from people who really do this stuff out of a labor of love, and who really want to like see the change that they want to put out the change that they want to see like in the world. So if you're feeling these feelings of, man, I really want to talk to other people about this, I want to make stuff happen, I'm actually with Christy and saying like, hey, starting your own group and getting stuff started is maybe the better way than trying to find a group where you might not even fit in or want to make things different anyway.
Yeah. Can I say one more thing?
Of course.
Please.
Yeah, I wanted to say one thing to the audience about like what it means to be a person like in your own. Because I reject the Latino label, I fall more under the mestizo category, which is the old term for the Spanish mixing with indigenous blood. And I favor the indigenous culture more because I frankly, you know, I've been to Spain and I don't look like a Spanish person at all. I've been to Mexico and I don't really fit in there either. I'm a Tejano, and I wanted to share this with your viewers or listeners who also might be that under that category. I say claim your native identity because that's what I am. And my ancestors will also be known as the Coahuiltecan, which is basically all of South Texas. And that's my home. and I miss it. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why that's important is because I wanted to sort of dispel the foreignness of the Latino term, because I mean, like I said, I'm Tejano, but I haven't, you know, I'm not really I don't have anything in common with somebody from Uruguay, you know, or I don't really have anything in common from somebody from Cuba. There's a political difference there that really matters.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially in Texas, right? You know, Latino being the highest minority group in Texas, right? So many people having their own individual communities and cultures here that's different from the rest of the world. We're asking ourselves a lot these days what terms like race mean to us, these sorts of social constructs that people tie their identities to. What is the importance of that? How that representation may not reflect the individual experiences of people broadly. And I'm of the opinion that you should take whatever label you feel comfortable for yourself, and take the labels that if you think share certain particular values to you, that you try to uphold those values. I'm all for it.
Yeah, so many people in the skeptic community get very uncomfortable with the notion of like self-identification. And we start hearing these references to like identifying as attack helicopters and some of that bullshit language. And I think this is a very clear-cut description of what these ideas really mean and why we have to sort of wrestle with our own identity and then connect to and identify with the aspects of our own history, the aspects of our own like birth and genetics and whatever else that are important to us and that we value, and not just take a oppressive label that is slapped on us by a government census or a birth certificate or whatever else. So I don't mean to overly conflate these things here, but Jesse, I really appreciate you talking to your feelings about that Latino label and why it doesn't feel appropriate to you, and why there is so much religious oppression mixed up even in that, you know, government census data.
Yeah, and the fact that I'm a mestizo was simply put there by the Catholic Church, and people just take it for granted because I'm like, no. The problem is that, again, Texas is my home. It's our home. It would be evil to be deported from my own land like that.
Heard. Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm sort of like really vehement on it. And I do think that the massive bloc that voted for Trump, that is under the Latino umbrella, I think voted by, it's a mistake. I think the Catholic Church is the reason for that, because there's a lot of conservatism that's inserted in the church. Because I used to be Catholic, and I strongly reject that. And I think that might be why a lot of Latinos voted for Trump.
No question. There's a lot to be said about voting against your own self-interest because of these religious affiliations and sort of the block voting that comes along with our two-party system. Thank you so much for reaching out and for sharing all of this. We definitely hope that you find a community that better suits you. And Lord, I know that Dan and I are here, at least in part, to try and advocate for a government, for a world that is less interested than the one we currently have in othering, ostracizing, and scapegoating minority communities.
Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, to me, also, one last thing is that I feel like the atheist community online that I can do connect with are the closest people I really find sort of a home with. Because, I mean, my own community, I mean, I mentioned atheism amongst the Chicano, Tejano community. Man, that's a good way to get kicked out of a house.
Sure. But you know what, though? You, as an individual, are going to be a better advocate for that in those spaces than Christy and I ever will. Right. So, you know, there is an advantage of your connections to those spaces that I think, you know, could be seen as something to, again, like take advantage of. I'm not telling you what to do. Right. But maybe there are people in those communities who are also just as isolated as you are, because they don't have those kinds of connections or resources, or think of atheism as a white thing, because a lot of people think of atheism as a white thing. So, you know, there's something to that, too, just to keep in mind.
Yeah, and I'll just point out that the incredible crew that helps Dan and I put this show on, like Dan and I are both local to the Austin area and both grew up around here, but our crew is made up from folks all over the place. I mean, we were telling jokes about Canada earlier today, like we are from everywhere. And if you don't have a community, maybe the atheist community of Austin can be a part of that solution wherever it is that you're located. We always have volunteer opportunities. We have all kinds of different meetups and opportunities to participate in this community. We hope that you'll join us and that you can find something of value there.
Thank you very much. I super duper appreciate it, and I hope to talk to y'all again soon.
Hey, same here.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for giving us a call. You have a great day. Yeah. Well, in reference to the folks who helped us put all of this together, I have once again neglected to say a big thank you to our crew. I'd love to get them up on the screen, folks who are from all over the place. Thank you so much for everything that you guys do to make us look good and to make all of this work.
Yes. Yes. We can't have a show without the crew. It can't just be us two guys just talking into the void. That's what it would be otherwise.
Yeah, that's the thing. It would just be a void. It would just be you and I not out in front of an audience and definitely not lit so well or sounding so smoothly.
Right. That's true. That's true. I really appreciate that call because you and I know are of the same mind about this, but I've talked to other skeptics who are so baffled when we talk about race as a social construct, where it's like, yeah, of course it is. Of course it is. How could it not be? Right. And yeah, that should be treated with the same amount of skepticism as we do with all the other kinds of topics that we talk about here with all the nuances and things that come with that. But yeah, that kind of identity is sort of self-defined and always has been. And when people kind of realize that, there's a power there, there's a liberation that comes with that people don't often realize. And sometimes they feel like they have to keep up with the status quo because, well, there's a lot of reasons why, but just an interesting conversation.
Yeah. Well, whether you are looking to volunteer or honestly just looking to be a part of our extended digital community, or even if you're local to the Austin area, we want you to be a part of this community. www.atheist-community.org is a great place to start where you can learn more about this organization, its policies, and different ways to get involved. So with that, what do you say we talk to Tom in Mississippi?
Yeah, that sounds good. Let's do it.
All right, Tom, you have some thoughts about comparative religion and religion in schools. What's on your mind?
Yeah, first I'd like to endorse your thanks of everybody who makes the show possible. But as to teaching comparative religion, I think that the actual syllabus taught might be fraught with contention.
Sure.
Why I believe it should only be taught as an elective, which kind of implies that it's not going to be taught at the elementary school level. Only at secondary levels, possibly at the high school level, but certainly no sooner than that. And the reason I say it should be elective is closely tied to that. For instance, if you're pursuing a major which has nothing to do in any articulable way with religion, you can go ahead and take comparative religion, but it wouldn't be required. On the other hand, the fine point is you might have a declared major where the people in charge of that school feel that comparative religion is required for the major, in which case it's required, not elective. And the second issue I had was about it not, I failed to see how this is even a debate. It seems to me that the plain reading of the Constitution plus later historical documents, I mean, one of the most notable being the Treaty of Tripoli, if I got that name right, that the government should just be ponderously unaware that such a thing as religion even exists. I think that's the only way to keep things clean in a legal sense. So religious behavior as a special category in law should not exist. I think all that should exist is what exists as acceptable social behavior.
Yeah. No, I hear you. And let's, I suppose, take those points kind of one at a time. Like the notion of teaching comparative religion in high school, I'm not a educator. I don't necessarily know how to best break that down, but I do feel like it's important to acknowledge that it would be impossible in my mind to get a well-rounded education at the high school level without ever having been introduced to religion and the role that it has played in our history, in the role that it has played in, really shaping science and philosophy and all of these other things. So I don't feel like I would be in support of some sort of blanket ban where like high schools can't even acknowledge the existence of these belief systems. But that's not the same as singling out a particular one and raising it up to something that we have to like honor as an important part of our history, when it's certainly like the Christianity is not all of our shared history or the shared history of everybody who goes to these schools. Dan, what do you want to say on that idea before we talk about, the constitutionality of this law?
No, I agree with you. How can you possibly talk about history and the history of ideas without talking about religion? I mean, that just seems so silly to me to be like, well, we can't talk about this aspect of human society and human culture, even though it's one of the most influential forces on the planet for what we've done, right? Like, I completely disagree. It should be available to be taught. Whether it should be a mandatory elective, that's another conversation. But I'll tell you this, Christy, when I was in college, I took a course on Islamic studies taught by a Muslim professor. And I learned about Islam and its history, particularly in Arabic society. And you know what? That was invaluable to me. I have no stock in Islam. I have no stock in it. I don't think any of it's, at least the core tenets of it, are true in any capacity. But I have a better understanding of the history of those ideas and how it influences the world. And you know what? If I ever do talk to a Muslim, I have a better context in which to approach that conversation than I ever would have without taking that course. So it's absolutely vital, I think, and important, especially if you're in a humanities study. But honestly, anybody that has a major in school these days in most universities has to have some sort of humanities. So even if you're doing like engineering, so like that's always going to be a thing people are going to take, whether they are particularly interested themselves or not. So, yeah, I mean, it should be available for people to teach. I don't know. I'm in the same camp as you, though. I'm not a professional in this regard. I don't know, like, am I going to put a tier list as to teaching this over that? I don't know. That's a little outside of my scope. But is it valuable? Should it be taught? Should it be available to be taught? Absolutely. Yeah.
I think maybe I was a bit misunderstood.
Sure. Help us out.
I did not mean to imply that at below high school level or even at high school level that any mention of religion was verboten. There's a difference between saying that historically the Roman Catholic Church did this and the Church of England did that, as opposed to discussing the theology of the Roman Catholic Church or the Anglican Church. That's the difference.
But I still disagree with you because theology
no.
I got to stop you right there, Tom, because that distinction is still not good enough for me. Yes, we should talk about the history. And yes, I do think we should talk about the theology because you know why? The theology also influenced the history, right? History doesn't happen in a vacuum. It comes through a zeitgeist of ideas, and theology has informed philosophy. And philosophy has informed the world. I mean, I don't have to agree with it. Obviously I don't, right? I'm on hello, I'm on Talk Heathen. Okay. We're on the same page there, but it's still important to know these things and be able to be informed about it. So yeah, I still think that's just as important.
Yeah, you can't teach world cultures, you can't teach world history without at least acknowledging what much of the world believes. And I think that there is value in diving somewhat at an age-appropriate level from a neutral point of view into what some of those beliefs are. I mean, is that fair, Tom? Like whether or not there's like a dedicated course to comparative religion at the high school level is a very specific question that I don't feel qualified to answer. But I do believe that, even in the third grade, when we're learning about world history and world cultures, that we can acknowledge some of the world's varying belief systems.
Again, I don't believe that I stated that religion could not be mentioned.
Heard, yeah.
I will acknowledge that this question of at what point is it appropriate to go to different depths into religion in terms of at what point, meaning at what age or under what curriculum, is a difficult question. There is not a bright line answer, I don't think, at all.
Sure.
However, that being said, for instance, in the third grade, it would be entirely possible to mention that, following my earlier analogy, that Henry VIII and his advisors decided to split off from the Roman Catholic Church without getting into theological discussions behind it, because that can be addressed. I mean, you can mention that there were theological differences, and you might even mention baldly what a couple are, but what should not happen is a debate over the merits. On the other hand, you can have a debate over the merits of the political situation there. But I think the other important thing to say is that it's very context sensitive in terms of age and curriculum. But the reason why I hesitate at lower levels is very pragmatic. In many places, I'm not sure of all, but in many places, the curriculum at elementary or junior high school level is settled very much by a local or relatively local school board.
Yeah.
Now, when you get to a college level, it's completely different. You're not going to your local public school or to a public school that the local area will allow you to attend if there is a public school choice. College now is entirely choice-based, pace financial considerations, obviously. The college that you go to, given you're qualified to go to that college, is much more of a choice. Hence, I don't really care about who's setting the syllabus, as long as you observe separation of church and state, i.e., if you're a college that accepts federal funding or state funding, there needs to be oversight over how balanced the syllabus is.
Tom, I got great news for you, because there's no third grader in anywhere in this entire country that's learning about Henry VIII and his theological inclinations or political inclinations. That's not a thing.
I agree.
And I'm saying this as someone whose former career was in private education. Okay, the standards are set. Yes, you're right in that courses are selected by local school boards, but standards of instruction are still set by the state, right? And so nobody in elementary school is getting a deep cut on Thomas Aquinas and their theology and stuff, right? I don't think it's just not happening, right? I think we're talking about maybe high school electives here and how appropriate that might be.
Yes.
And even then, maybe having a deep cut theology class may not be the most important thing when compared to other stuff. But I mean, if it's an elective, it's an elective, right? They're certainly not doing that in most public schools. In fact, I don't know of any public schools, certainly not in Texas, that are requiring Christian stuff. Although Oklahoma's trying to change that. But the point is,
understanding some of the core
get
principles or precepts of all of this is not the same thing as debating their merit.
Yeah.
So, I don't want to get too much further into the weeds of us sort of pontificating on what schools should be teaching, but I, just broadly want to acknowledge that I think at any age, it is appropriate to acknowledge religion exists, and this is what some people believe, and this is what other people believe. But to your other point about the constitutionality of this law that is being considered here in Texas and that is very likely to be signed by the governor soon, I do worry about the constitutionality. A very similar, if not almost identical law, as I understand it, was struck down in Louisiana by the Supreme Court, and that there is cause to believe that this will almost immediately be challenged. And as a non-lawyer, that makes good goddamn sense, because it's hard for me to wrap my head around how this could possibly line up with the Constitution.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement there. I take probably a reasonably extreme view of it when I say the government should be ponderously unaware in law. But yeah. And the only thing I was trying to get at is that I think that getting back to what's taught, I think that at the college level it's pretty clear cut that the government should be out of it. I think that at grade school it's pretty clear that you don't want to dive into the merits, and it gets fuzzy when you talk about high school. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Fair enough. No, I mean, debating over the merits of a particular belief system, that can get certainly very messy. I like the idea of teenagers learning critical thinking skills. I like the idea of them being able to criticize a set of beliefs or a particular philosophy, even if they're 13 and wrong, even if their conclusions aren't necessarily what I would hope for from them. I think that part of any well-rounded education is a willingness to question things, to challenge things, and being taught maybe how to do that in a reasonable, well-reasoned, intellectual way. So, we're on the same page here, and it sounds like, Tom, we're all just kind of crossing our fingers that we are headed in the right direction politically, and that our governance is going to honor the rule of law, and that we can actually hold strong to the Constitution.
Yep. Just one final thing I'd say is that I want to endorse your belief in the importance of the humanities, or what used to be called liberal arts, even among people who are taking a strongly technical major. I'm with you there too. Absolutely.
Yeah, we need to prevent STEM lords from ruining our society. So I'm always going to promote the humanities there.
Yep. Okay, that'll do it. Thanks a lot.
Cool. Yeah, thank you, Tom. We really appreciate talking to you. Yeah, Dan, I don't know. I don't want to be too squeamish. Like, I recognize that Talk Heathen, the atheist community of Austin, we've been having conversations like this for a long time. I don't necessarily know that we're a watchdog organization, but this is certainly not the first time that two hosts like you and I have sat down and wrung our hands about the erosion of the wall of separation of church and state. That being said, does this feel like just another tug back and forth in the tug of war? Or for you, does it start to feel like we are, taking another meaningful step in an increasingly worrying direction?
Oh, increasingly worrying direction there, Christy. I mean,
yeah. Okay. Listen, so I'm not just being alarmist, right?
No, listen, in my lifetime, this has been the greatest threat of that separation, I would say, for sure, because of the political situation, because of our Supreme Court situation. In my personal opinion, yes, it is absolutely the most worrying. And our work as activists has never been more important in that regard, I would say. Not that it hasn't been important before, but we are at what I would consider to be a major potential turning point, which is why I think we should raise the alarm bells. So, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I have mentioned it on this show before, and I don't mean to repeat myself, and I hate thinking of myself as any kind of alarmist. But when I became a gender and sexuality therapist here in Texas, I started my own business, I was worried about like my expenses and how do I advertise and getting referrals and how do I have clients coming in? How do I make money? Like all of the things that you worry about when you're running a business. I did not have anywhere in my top 10 things to be concerned about all of my clients turning into political refugees and fleeing the state because of their increasing, very legitimate worries of the oppressive nature of our governance. And that is becoming like a major, I hate to put it in business terms, but as that one metric, it's a major concern for like the long-term viability of the work I'm trying to do here.
Yeah, absolutely. In many, many, many different facets, that's true. In immigration, in social and political identity, and in schools as well. I mean, we're at like Scope's monkey trial level of importance right now in Supreme Court cases, in my opinion, when it comes to this stuff. And it's alarming because we are both private citizens, and you and I don't know any governors or anything like that.
Billionaire donors.
Our millionaire donors. Our influence only goes so far as to the people that listen to us. But I still try my best. I don't know, and I know you try too. So we're trying.
All right. Well, let's keep trying. And on that note, let's talk again to Dee in Iowa, who has some concerns about Catholicism's role in our society. Dee, what's on your mind?
Hey, Christy. Hey, Dan.
Howdy.
Good to talk to you guys. So, kind of piggybacking on Jimmy Jr.'s intro today. Honestly, and I want to pivot slightly to kind of support Jesse's call, because he makes my point that Catholicism is a cult, and it's actually a predatory cult because it appropriates and then destroys certain cultural beliefs, practices, religions. It's based on its dogma and its doctrines have come from appropriating pagan beliefs and celebrations and incorporating that into their belief and then proceeding to destroy them. And as they progressed through the world, as they progressed by I think, wasn't it Constantine that converted and then started using the sword to spread? They then turned to funding through different kings and queens and kingdoms.
Really just dragon hoarding in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
You'll definitely find no defense of Catholicism or the Roman Catholic Church here. But when you make it a point to refer to Catholicism as a cult, I'm really curious what that word means to you. I really appreciate Amanda Montell's perspective on all of this when she writes about how the only difference between a cult and a religion is the point of view and how pejorative you want to be about it. Yeah. Working in religious trauma, I don't necessarily find like the bite model or any of these other distinctions between cult and religion particularly useful. I find that cult is really just a pejorative term for religion, and I'm fine with that in the extent that I want to be like rude about somebody else's belief systems. Obviously, I'm here promoting atheism and the critical thinking that I think would tear down religious thought. But why use that particular term? Why is that important to make that distinction here?
To me, a cult has it has many definitions, however, and characteristics. My view of what a cult is number one, the cult has bizarre belief system based on things that are by themselves would be maybe socially unacceptable, such as cannibalism and human sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
And then the degree of control that it exerts over not only its members, but its environment. And I wasn't going to go into a whole thing about, what cults are, how you can define them, how you can blah, blah, blah. But
we find
two definitions because I knew you would ask me that.
Sure. When we find, truly bizarre beliefs in other forms of Christianity, in Buddhism, in Islam, and a lot of religions that frankly don't have as many adherents as the Roman Catholic Church. Again, I am not trying to come in defense of the Roman Catholic Church. I've spoken on this show recently about the Pope election and how my concerns and feelings about that organization are definitely already on the record. And I don't mean to pick on you for your language, but it seemed like such a important crux of what it was that you came here to share. And I'm interested in what makes you maybe want to single out the Roman Catholic Church versus railing against Islam, versus railing against Buddhism, or any of these other also very popular world religions or belief systems.
She might think those are cults too. I don't know. Maybe Dee feels that way.
I single out Catholicism because I am more knowledgeable about Catholicism than I am about Islam or Buddhism or any other, established religion or belief system.
Yeah, I'll tell you, you get deep enough into Buddhism and you start hearing some really weird stories.
Yep. Some fucked up things too.
No, that's
for sure.
True. But like I said, I don't know Islam. And while I have investigated Buddhism, I found recently that I really don't know as much as I thought I did.
Mm-hmm.
And the Catholicism is responsible. They piggyback themselves on the age of exploration and discovery with, the Spanish and English colonization. As Jesse said, his ancestors were brutally exploited, converted by force. We know that in the United States and in Canada, hundreds, if not thousands, of young Native Americans and Native Canadians were slaughtered at Catholic schools, abused at Catholic schools. So I believe that the definitions of a cult that I laid out earlier are very much so fulfilled by Catholic Church.
Yeah. I guess my thing I would take with that is just because an organization abuses and exploits and colonializes, that itself doesn't make it a cult. We would call the U.S. a cult, although maybe the U.S. is a cult. I don't know, but like a lot of colonial powers would be cults under that idea. I don't think something has to be exploitative to be a cult either. I just think you just have, what Catholicism really does, though, what I do share your criticisms with is when you define orthodoxy, you also define heterodoxy, right? In other words, when you define what's okay and what's not, when you define what's okay, you're also defining what's not okay. And the Catholic Church has been, sort of historical in their judgments on other cultures, other belief systems, other ways of life that have been antithetical to the powers that be for the Catholic Church, and therefore they've sought their destruction, which is unfortunate and obviously terrible. So I think we both take umbrage with that.
I'm well aware that my language is harsh and controversial, and I appreciate you guys' counterpoints. But I am unapologetic at this time, and until such time as this Pope causes a major shift in the general attitude of Catholicism, I will continue to refer to it as a cult.
Yeah, no, that's fair to say.
I'm not doing that for shock value. I'm not doing it for sensationalism's sake. It's what I truly believe based on the history. And I just wanted to say one other thing for Jesse. While he was speaking, I did some Googling for Latino artists, and I dropped some links in the chat for him to check out. I really appreciate his journey in claiming his ancestry and his identity. It really touched me deeply, and I hope that he continues to find a place where he feels he belongs.
Yeah, so say we all. I definitely want to be on the favor of creating community. As a religious trauma therapist, yes, of course, I spend a lot of time helping people work through the I guess we'll call positive traumas, or the experiences of bad things happening to you, having these beliefs shoved down your throats, being criticized and hurt in these very specific ways. But there's also the trauma of being removed from your community, being isolated from your community, and so many of the things that you lose when you walk away from religion. And I think that there is remarkable value in recognizing that loss. Walking away from religion may be addition by subtraction, but it's still going to hurt because you're losing a lot of valuable aspects of your day-to-day life. And I hope that the atheism community recognizes that, or just really recognizes how important it is to have a community, whether it's centered around atheism the way that this particular community is, or whether it's centered around, RuPaul's Drag Race or Dungeons and Dragons or whatever the hell else. You need friends in your life. Every good study on health and well-being in humans says that over and over and over. So, Dee, we wish you the best. Jesse, again, we certainly wish you the best. And we hope that everybody listening feels like they have important people in their lives that they can share the mundane and the, deep, heady philosophical.
And I appreciate that you're there for those of us who have lost community and friends and everything. It's just awesome, and hopefully the clients of yours that have felt so unsafe that they had to leave the state, I hope that you can continue to counsel them, possibly through online and stuff like that, because you are really providing an invaluable service. So thank you, Christy. And with that, I will jump off. I know I've taken a lot of time, so thank you.
No, I appreciate you saying so. Thank you so much for your call, and have a great Sunday afternoon. All right. Dan, I want to take a moment to thank our top 5 patrons. I'm going to give you a second maybe to get some of our super chats pulled up as we have more of those coming in. But first and foremost, our top 5 patrons this week. Number 1, Oops All Singularity. Number 2, Dingleberry Jackson. 3, Kalevi Helvetti. 4, Brian Zupke. And in the 5th spot is J.A. Calton. And our honorable mention this week, Deanne Kearns. Thanks to each of you. Thanks to all of you who are part of supporting us on Patreon. If you're interested in joining, that's at tiny.cc/PatreonTH. And on that note, we have been recording the Talk Heathen Discord after shows for all level of paid patrons. And so if you're looking for even more content, even more conversations like this, please give that a try.
Yeah, and we do have some super chats that so these came quite earlier. I'm glad you brought it up because we should go ahead and read these. One from Miranda Rensberger, a member of 1 year, gave $10 and said, "Happy Pride Month, all you heathens. Don't let people get away with using their religion as an excuse to hate or discriminate."
That's not what religious freedom means.
That's right. That's right. I co-sign on that, Miranda. And I don't know what this was in reference to, but Blind Limey, a member of 2 years, gave $5 and said, "Dan's right. I'm going to start my own ACA with blackjack and redacted." That's not me redacting things. It just says redacted.
Yeah. No, we're talking about forming community and whatever you want to form that community around.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. Blackjack and atheism. Yeah. I don't know. Could be a thing.
Sure.
I guess if you want it to be,
Yeah. Well, we've got some other interesting callers on the line. Who do you want to roll the dice with?
Oh, who do I want to roll the dice with? Maybe. Gosh, I don't know. What do you want? Who do you want to talk to? I know you literally just asked you that, but either one I could go with that I see here.
Okay, well,
Nick or Michelle.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's do Nick in Massachusetts and see what is on his mind today. Nick, determination, predetermination, non-determination. What you got for us?
Hi. So I kind of wanted to get your guys' sort of thoughts on what predetermined, like a predetermined reality, or non-predetermined reality, or like the combination of the two. Like, what do you think we're living in, and what if like that has any bearing, or if it makes any claims, like if it has a consequence of like making a statement on whether there's a sentient God or not, or maybe like a prime non-sentient intelligence. Like
Sure. Well, let me just jump in and say, I'll go ahead and start by saying that, whether this is all just causality that is repercussions of the Big Bang and everything is predetermined, or whether there is actual random chance that's possible through quantum mechanics and our growing understanding of those things, I will admit it's hard for me to find any room for free will in either of those situations. And I definitely don't see any evidence for God in either perspective. Dan, what does any of this mean to you?
I'm in the same boat as you, Christy. I think people get confused because I do believe we live in a deterministic universe, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everything is predetermined. I mean, if it is, then we certainly as humans don't know about it, right? We don't have all the information or variables to predict the things that we'd want to know exactly in our lives. So it's almost a moot point in a way. I think people kind of overemphasize this, especially Christians who criticize our points. They're like, well, you just think everything, like nothing matters because we don't have free will. And it's like, that doesn't mean that like we can't like interact with the world. It just means that there's determinist systems. Like it's a little bit more complicated, I guess.
Yeah, if it feels like I'm making a decision, then as far as I'm concerned, at the level of experience, I'm making a decision, and I'm going to try and make some good ones.
Exactly, and that's not me necessarily like promoting compatibilism in a way. I'm just saying it's a little bit more nuanced than what people give it credit for when we talk about this. But yeah, is the universe deterministic, or is it made of determinist systems? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, like so the reason why I asked that is because like I feel like there's a comment, like it's both things that are happening. Like there's a like 100, let's say there's 100% will, because that by definition, just like will, like in terms of like there's like agentic will, and then there's non-agentic, like predetermined, just Big Bang force will. So like I feel like, you know, genetics is more like there's a significant aspect of like molecular dynamics that is more on the side of like Big Bang force, and then, you know, there's our experiential like day-to-day side of things where we're conscious of our experience and like having that feedback loop into our like continuous decision-making process. And the fact that like when I dream, like when I'm dreaming, maybe you guys might relate to this, I sense, like I feel an objective change in my ability to control my environment and myself. So like when I'm dreaming, I can observe and feel like more creative control and like environmental control, but I lose the ability to like be feeling my body and being like one with my whole physical experience in the dream. So like there's like a change.
And I think we have to acknowledge that experience is a subjective one. That there is no objective increase in control. If anything, dreams are just an important reminder to me that we shape our own realities. But I'm struggling with how any of this gets us closer to or further away from free will and or the existence of a God.
Okay. So I think that it's like, I don't, for one thing, for like on the free will side, I don't think that anything has like total will. I think we have like partial will that doesn't necessarily like control any system completely. But
I'd say about 10% luck, 20% skill, 15% concentrated power of will.
Right.
Is what I would say. Sorry, that's a bad joke. Go on.
No, I get it. Yeah. So like what that has to say about like a God or like, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure, because I feel like if, you know, like, well, like if there's like extra physical creator version of a God, or there's like the pantheist, just like latent energy space of like definition of a God. I mean, if like I'm sort of like in the camp where, you know, if I just go with from what I'm seeing, like that is the universe, I think that there's like some cyclical aspect, and like but I can't really explain like why anything exists besides like the necessity for like structural coherence. Like I feel like I can't really it's almost like the universe is saying you can't have anything without an uncontrollable like a completely uncontrollable force to drive the medium, like to drive continuity forward for the non-deterministic, non-determined aspects of reality for life.
I mean, Nick, I recognize that these concepts are incredibly challenging and confusing in a lot of ways. And I don't mean to pick on you, but when you say that you don't know how to explain, I do find myself this deep into the call really unclear on what it is that you are even attempting to explain. Can you help us a little bit? Because I know one aspect of this type of philosophy is just how tempting it is to get overwhelmed by it and to maybe feel this like existential dread and then just kind of start grabbing things and shoving them together and putting the word quantum in front of it and like trying to use it to justify some sort of worldview without having wrapped our head around each of the individual concepts. Can you break it down for me a little bit, or maybe even just bottom line it to what does any of this mean?
Well, so I think that if there's anything that like is pretty if anything is going to say anything about whether or not like a God exists, I think that like the fact that there's a like dead at like non-agentic aspects of reality and then agentic ones. I feel like that, if anything, would give us a clue about like the origins of the universe and life.
Yeah, if we could ever separate them out, though.
Yeah.
Right? Like how do we know that we are being agentic in any meaningful way, or how that isn't just, again, another sequence of predetermined things? Like, did I take a sip of water because I wanted to, or did I take a sip of water because my throat was dry? What the hell is the difference? And where does any of that, like, if we could somehow separate these things out to, am I truly making a choice, or is the choice just predetermined by all of the other things that led up to that choice? Perhaps there could be some insight there into the choices that led to this universe existing. But I'm really struggling with like that idea that we could ever get there.
Right.
Do you think that there's like a mechanistic way to differentiate between like an agent and a non-agent?
Not that I can understand, or not that I'm aware of. Dan?
Yeah, I don't think so. Like the thing with these is we have to ask ourselves, could we have done different, right? And I don't know how answerable of a question that even is. And when you bring God into the equation, if you ask, could God have done different? If the answer to that is no, then that seems to be just as deterministic as anything else, right? So yeah, I don't know. This is one of the problems of our times. That's even more accentuated with the rise of AI and whatnot. So yeah, I'm not gonna be that guy that's gonna have all the answers for you.
Yeah. I think like if we can like the way that I know we haven't like explained abiogenesis yet. Like we haven't like come together completely in the scientific community to like fully like mechanistically explain abiogenesis. But I think like if I go on like my hunch about like what it's gonna involve like in the explanation, if when we get there, it's like whatever the initial conditions are, like whatever led up to the initial conditions for like the formation event is whatever, but like the formation event sort of would necessitate like a weightless environment, or like a near weightless environment inside an encapsulation, like an encapsulated barrier. I feel like the weightlessness is sort of like homeostatic, and for me, what that like, it's like an environment that like reduces the size like of scope of like of locality for non-deterministic events to happen. So it's just like, I don't know, there's some power in weightlessness that I can't really fully comprehend.
I don't know if weightlessness is necessary for abiogenesis. I don't know that we know what is necessary for abiogenesis. And I definitely don't know that I am following where you get your hunch from or why that's necessarily compelling. I think the last thing I would really say about any of this, Nick, is just from the perspective of the like very applied philosophy of clinical counseling, is I would say that, yeah, it's probably likely true that we aren't making these choices, except that we are just following a series of choices that have already been made, or maybe they're not even choices, maybe they are just things that happen. And part of that still empowers us to be introspective about who we are as people and what we want out of life and what we want to do about any of it. None of it gives us the ability to forecast or understand things that we simply don't understand. And it doesn't make the existential void of, is there a God, or why are we here, or why do we exist, any different.
Yeah. With regards to the like determinism thing, like for example, I can't transform into a dragon right now. I can, feel like I really want to, and I can maybe try to change how much harder I feel that I want to change into a dragon. But like the mechanistic scope of like possibility isn't there. Like it's not physically possible. But then there's like physically possible. There's like the physically possible scope of things that can happen from whatever the now is. And if we have like a coherent understanding of like those options, different options in that scope, and we're aware of that, I feel like that's the indicative of like will. I'm not, I wouldn't say that it's like evidentiary of like free reign type of will. But I would.
I don't know. You're still assuming that it is impossible for you to transform into a dragon, but it is possible to do all of these other things. And I guess I'm just not there yet. I'm not convinced that just because we haven't seen something doesn't mean that it can't theoretically be possible. But I'm not sure how much further we can get in all of this, since so much of it is conjecture. Dan, are you comfortable with leaving it there?
I think I'm good with leaving it there. I mean, look, at this point in the process, you want to refer to the people who have written whole books about this stuff that have way better defined terms, have way better concise explanations about the things that we're going into here, because ultimately you and I are laymen on this subject, and we can give our perspectives. And I think that's about as far as we can go,
Yeah. To that end, I personally enjoyed Determined by Robert Sapolsky. Dan, I don't know if you co-signed that one, but yeah, keep reading. And Nick, we really appreciate you giving it a try with us and giving us a call.
Alrighty, thank you.
Have a great day. All right. Yeah, let's sneak in one more quick call before we start to wrap up today and hear from Michelle. I know that Michelle has been waiting for a good long while. So what's on your mind today, Michelle?
Well, I was thinking throughout the calls, and I thought that I would rephrase my question. The way I had it phrased was, does skepticism presuppose belief or faith? However, I thought that would put me in a rock and a hard space to prove, because the way I have it understood that presuppositional arguments work is that the thing, like if I would say, well, does skepticism presuppose belief? That would mean I was saying that you start with belief, and that's the ground. That would be the ground for the skepticism. However, I want to change that around and say, does skepticism, must there be a sense of belief with our skepticism? Must we always be mixing our skepticism with the question of like, hey, does God exist? Maybe do pixie farting, universe farting pixies exist? Anything like supernatural, spirits, ghosts, afterlife, anything of the sort, aliens, extraterrestrials. Can we say that anything of the sort exists? Should we at least dare to say maybe or kind of like that? Go.
I'm not sure I follow the question. How about you?
Yeah,
Dan?
you started off with an interesting question, which was, does skepticism presuppose beliefs? That's a very interesting question. But then you said you wanted to change your question, and I'm not sure what the changed question was. Can you give us like one sentence version of what the changed question is?
Tell me, Dan. Maybe you could tell me. Am I wrong when I say that if my question is, does skepticism presuppose belief? Am I wrong to say that by saying that, I mean that we must believe first in something supernatural, let's say, for example, and then we must be doubtful? Or can we just say we take a belief and skepticism at the same time and we're all the better for it? You know what I mean? You know what I'm getting at now?
I think skepticism is just the degree of maybe humility with which we hold a belief.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's different perspectives because philosophy is a wide-ranging field and they have different ideas and different perspectives on what skepticism is. Interestingly, though, there is a line of thought that says skepticism is a materialist perspective, right? And what I mean by that is the suspension of this belief, right, or the suspension of belief in particular claims. Generally, the trend is it comes from some line of observation, whether it's through logical reasoning or in more recent years through scientific observation. That's very interesting, right? Because there is a trust there that's inherent to the scientific method in understanding whether things are true or not. So in one sense, you could say there's a presupposition there, but that's only if you hold the scientific method to be a reliable arbiter of what's true. Maybe you have skepticism, but you're from maybe you're a psychic or a believer, and you're skeptical of people who say that being psychic stuff isn't real. It kind of cuts both ways in that sense. So there's very specific context in which we use the word skepticism, or which skepticism is used in philosophy there. So I guess like many answers, it kind of depends. But I don't think you'd necessarily be wrong in saying it could presuppose belief. It again really depends on how you're defining that.
I guess right now, can we move into maybe really quickly defining belief and faith, and then move it back to skepticism? Because for me, I can believe, for example, like for me, belief involves a certain amount of certainty about something. Mm-hmm. For me, I can believe that if I go to my refrigerator right now, that there might be a soda pop in there waiting for me. Maybe I put one in there the other day and I forgot about it, and maybe oh, it's in there, maybe it's not because someone drank it on me. Or I can have faith that it's in there. I have no evidence whatsoever. I didn't put it in there. I don't remember putting it in there. Maybe I'm going on faith that maybe someone put one in there for me and it's cold just waiting for me. But I have no evidence whatsoever, but I can hope. That's faith. When you have no evidence to promote or give you any or to give you anything to bounce back to belief on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So and then we move back to skepticism, and we judge our beliefs. We move back into skepticism, and then we say, well, here's where I'm skeptical about this faith part of the thing, and when I'm believing, and then here's my skepticism about my beliefs.
Yeah. I mean, there's no necessarily wrong answers here because belief has been defined in various capacities. If you notice, when Christy and I talk to particularly theists, we are usually going to be the first ones to ask, what do you mean by faith? What do you mean by belief? Right? Because that's always going to be rooted in individual perspectives. I mean, Christy and I may have much more defined, more rigorous ideas of that, but on the man on the street kind of person maybe doesn't, right? And it may take a bit to tease that out. So like belief to me is more like an attitude about something, right? So I acknowledge the subjective inherent perspectivism that comes with belief. I might define knowledge as a justified true belief, but even then there's problems with how you consider something to be a justified true belief. Very, very famously, Gettier problems and whatnot that come with that kind of philosophy. So I'm not going to say you're wrong on your definition there, Michelle. In fact, I think that's a pretty well thought out answer, because I don't think there is going to be one answer to this question. I think it's going to be based on the individual. But what do you think, Christy?
Well, and it really is, like you said, more of a question of linguistics than philosophy at this stage in the game. Like, how do we define belief absent of skepticism or vice versa? I'm fine with some of the definitions that we've come up with. I don't know how functional all of this is when we actually start to talk to people about what it is that they believe and why. And I'm not necessarily somebody who holds up skepticism as a incredible virtue. I know that that's a common talking point in this community. And I think that I'll stick with my sort of earlier definition of humility. It's just about holding the beliefs that we hold with a certain amount of hesitation or a certain amount of humility about their certainty and their assuredness.
Yeah. If I may give an example, brief example, I kind of like to think about, well, I'm certain and I am agnostic about the fact that if I jump out of a plane at 30,000 feet in the air without a parachute on, either A, I'm going to break every bone in my body and somehow contradictorily survive that accident, or I'm going to die. I'm agnostic about those facts, because those are facts. Those are true facts. I am not, however, confident or have the conviction enough to say, or agnostic enough to say, that I know that God exists and I'm going to live eternally in a celibate kingdom that I don't want to endure forever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is
how is that for an example?
Well, this is the problem of atheist activism as a whole. We're always going to be on the back foot when it comes to this, right? Because there's a million God beliefs, and there's only one of us. And the way that we even define our atheism is contentious. There's different ideas about this. Should we define it as a positive claim, or should we define it as a lack of belief? There's all kinds of different conversations about this, and I think that nuance gets lost on a lot of people because it's just not. It doesn't come up in common conversation. I certainly wasn't taught about the nuances of the atheist position when I was a Christian. Okay, so there's always going to be different ideas to this, but how I like to look at it is I have a lot of different ideas that I've encountered about God in particular, and I do reject openly some of these ideas. I'm not conclusive about some ideas, like a God that is completely outside of the known material universe. Sure, how can I know about the existence of one or not? I can be agnostic about that, but as far as the Yahweh of the Bible, of the Semitic tribes, I don't think that one's going to be it, Chief. I don't think that one's real. So, that's my take on a lot of this, but I can only say that in so many words, right? And it's hard to sort of give that kind of nuance when talking to people about this, which is why many people are confused about the atheist position, what it actually means, or what it means to most people, right?
Right. Dan, if I may ask really quickly before we end the call, I think, and this is a great suggestion, because one thing that I've watched a lot of the shows on this line and some others on the ACA and some other atheist call-in shows. ACA is the best, of course, on TV. But I think you guys should have someone on that believes, slightly at least, in a creator being, and interview them and take calls with them and actually have them answer calls with you guys.
I mean, I do that on Truth Wanted from time to time. Yeah, my last Christian guest was on a couple of months ago.
We've done things along those lines, but yeah. So if you have somebody in mind, if there's a particular person you want to recommend, we're always taking those recommendations. I mean, shoot us an email, tv@atheist-community.org. If there's somebody who's interested in talking to us, I'm not going to guarantee an interview to anybody, but I know our producers would be interested to speak to them.
Yeah. I'm proud to say that I host the only Atheist Community of Austin show that has had openly theist people on as guests, not just as callers.
Only currently running shows.
Only currently running.
Only currently
but
running.
I was still again, yeah, that's true. That's true. You're right. I should clarify on that. But it has. I'll be honest. It's hard to find people, Michelle, that can still vibe with us enough that we can make it an hour and a half without it turning into a shit show. Right. So there's a give and take with that. And some people don't even like it when we do it, by the way. But I think those end up being some of the most interesting content that we produce. But that's my take.
Dan, I think I could vie with you guys if you would just have me on.
Oh, come on, Michelle. You can't do this. You can't. Don't beg for the spot live on the show. There's an interview process.
Man. It's a thing. It's a thing.
Michelle.
We do appreciate your phone call.
Crazy. I'm getting people in chat. I know I'm not watching the live stream, but I know I'm getting people in chat saying, "Have her on, have her on."
Oh, Michelle.
Well, we'll see if there's a groundswell of movement. Thank you so much for your call and for your time, and we hope you have a great Sunday afternoon.
Yeah. On that note, any inquiries that go to the show should go to tv@atheist-community.org. Okay. We're not going to negotiate terms about potential guests live on the air. Okay. That's just not a thing. Not going to happen. So
not how these interviews work. Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a little bit of a process. Somehow Dan and I got through it, but there is a process that exists. But no, Dan, it's been a fun show. We've had a good time. Let's get Aaron back up and we can talk about it and start to wrap things up for the day.
Let's do it.
Aaron, how did we do? Are we worthy of being hosts on this network? Have we gone through the process? Was it a good time?
Done it? 10 out of 10 would recommend. Yes, you guys.
Oh, great!
Fabulous show. Great calls.
Thanks. You would never say otherwise, right, Aaron? You'd always tell us. You'd always tell us the truth.
Sure.
Yeah,
sure,
okay.
Dan.
Yeah.
You'd always tell me the truth, right? Right? It's mutual.
Yeah. 100%, Aaron. Yeah. Anyway.
Calls. I really like Tom's phrase. I'm not sure where he got it from, but ponderously unaware of religion. I kind of like that phrasing, that the government should be ponderously unaware of religion. I think that would help a lot if it was actually like that. And D's, you guys talked about the cult versus religion, and I heard that defined once as the difference between a cult and a religion is how hard it is to leave. The harder it is to leave, the more cultish it is.
Ooh, sure. I like that. Yeah.
And then as far as beliefs are concerned, with Michelle's last call, I like Steve Jobs' adage where you held strong opinions loosely held. Strong opinions loosely held, where you're easily convinced. You believe what you believe strongly, but you can always, all your beliefs are subject to change at any time, given new evidence, given new persuasive arguments, whatever that is. That nothing that we
a lack of pride, a lack of preciousness around some of these things, humbleness and willingness to embrace change. I appreciate that.
Yep. So
beautiful. Well, so for folks who still want to weigh in the comments for the video, what was our question of the week this week?
Oh, our question of the week this week was, what would Jesus's rapper name be?
Right.
Please do better than Dan.
Please do better than us. Oh my God. We did not deliver today, folks. But
I'd probably go with King Cross or something like that.
King Cross is
King Cross. All right,
bad.
That actually plays. No, that was much better.
Yeah. There's something to that.
Well, anybody y'all are sending out love rings to today? Certainly our crew and everybody who helped us get this going, especially since I so often forget to bring us up to that camera shot and to let us see their beautiful faces. Who else y'all got?
You talking to me?
Yeah, who are you talking to?
Anybody else y'all sending out love rings to?
Oh, gotcha.
Just
okay.
Everybody out there.
Sending it to the Happy Pride Month. Sending it to the folks in our LGBT plus community. You know,
anybody who needs a community is looking to belong somewhere. This is your community, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you don't believe, this is your community. We appreciate you being here. If you do believe, we definitely don't hate you. We're just not convinced.
Not convinced. Woo! We did it.
We want the truth. So watch Truth Wanted live Fridays at 7 p.m. Central. Call 512-991-9242 or visit tiny.cc/call TW.